Hi again, Lawyer Forward audience. I'm Mike Whalen. As you know, we're here talking to our friends about the next thing. We've all jumped, put our practices online, touched the internets and the facey spaces and put all our things in all the clouds or whatever. And now we need to know what to do. Do we change our practices? Do we add practice areas or products? Do we just change what we deliver? Is there some fundamental permanent change? There's just a lot to think about. So we've got friends like Andrea here who are telling us what the heck to do with this weird moment. Before I turn it over to Andrea, I just want to remind you guys, 2020, no editing. I just want to remind you guys that I want you to watch out on the Lawyer Forward Facebook group for when we do the watch parties around these sessions. So we're going to have this session, we'll have a date, and it'll be like 2 point whatever it is. And we'll put it up on the Facebook group, and you'll be able to, under that thread, you'll be able to find it, and you can just ping around ideas. Andrea and I'll be there, a bunch of other people in the group bouncing ideas around, and you'll be able to, even if you're in the future, come back to that conversation. So make sure you look out for that. All right, Andrea Cannavina, and I can't help but say it with a bit of the accent. How are you doing in these? I was told yesterday on Twitter that if you're getting fatter, it's not an apocalypse, right? So if you're like me and you're eating a bunch of brownies, you can't joke anymore that it's the apocalypse because, you know.
Everyone likes to, I've been doing this a long time, so I don't get to say those things anymore because I kind of did that part already. And I have yet to go through the phase where I can't help but to keep working out. I see a lot of people go in their digital journeys, tend to go from overeating to overworking out and usually end up a few years later somewhere back in the middle. So
I'm super health conscious every 6 months or something, and that lasts about 2 weeks. I will say at this time, that is not a risk. That's not happening. We're like baked. My daughter seriously walked in last night and she was like, why do we not have any more brownie mix? I need to make some more brownies. I was like, we've had brownies every day for the last week. It's a problem. Anyway, how are you doing? How are you adjusting? You were working virtual before, so must not have been a huge shift for you.
Well, there are some shifts because there's more people in my environment. Let's put it that way. So I've gone the other way to having to figure out how to work back into the schedule that I first figured out when my kids were little. They're now college age. So it feels like I'm back to getting everybody, reminding them when I'm working, making sure that we have ground rules, chunking my time to when they're most likely not to be around. It's pretty much bringing me back to the days when I first had to start. So.
Yeah, I've said working from home was not that difficult. It's working from home. It's my kids working from home that's the problem. And really,
with other people.
Period. Right. Yeah, and really, one of the things that we've traded off for, and this is a transition over to what you do. One of the things that a lot of us had at some point was we'd go to an office and we'd see people who were not family people. My wife would always joke that, anytime she'd see an adult in Target, she'd talk to them for 20 minutes because she just so desperately needed some adult time, just from the kids touching her all the time, just all the nonsense. And a lot of us had that sort of escape to go have a common experience with other people who were working on the same kinds of things we were working on. We don't have that anymore right now. And we're going to talk about how to deal with virtual teams and all this stuff. But before I get to that, tell me a bit about your background, why you and I are having this conversation about how stupid I am when it comes to delegation.
Well, it's not stupid. It's ignorant. You just didn't know any better. And you got to learn about delegation the same way that I got to learn about being in business and a lot of other things through the School of Hard Knocks. So I like to refer to the E-Myth, the book, and Michael Gerber quite a bit because it's where you learn to systematize what you have in your business. And for lawyers, that's the work product. That's the stuff that they actually generate, as well as the time that they spend, of course, in the face-to-face required stuff. But, so I'd say that, but I learned all of the stuff from the E-Myth like you did through delegation, through the School of Hard Knocks. So, it's kind of a teacher going through it. It's a much easy. It's a reminder for sure. That's not just something that you read in a productivity book. So it's kind of more ingrained. So a lot of the
But now
things that came out
you have,
after, I already incorporated.
yeah, so you have two companies now, right?
I have several websites,
Ah,
so it's kind of funny. I see you're noticing Law Firm Solutions, which is my blog. It's my personal blog. I haven't been quite an active blogger for a great deal of time. I've been concentrating a lot of my efforts on getting together some consulting work, working one-on-one with attorneys, because ultimately I found that's where my passion is. I work very well with people who are very high-powered, very stressed, and actually just want to have the right answers. I think the favorite thing that I like to say is I just make things work. So you tell me what you have, you tell me what you need done, and I figure out how to make it all work, or what you need to add, or what you need to take away. So it makes my attorneys not have to be the IT person, not have to be the manager, not have to be the vetter of services or processes. And it's all just based on the experiences that I've had throughout the almost 2 decades of doing what it is that I do.
sure. So tell us about what you do in terms of your background. You've got legal typist now. Tell me what that company is and what brought you to this point.
Okay, so it started out with me in '01, and then I started taking on more work than I could accomplish with taking, 2 kids under the age of, I think, 10, probably 8 at that point, just babies. And it was, I started getting resumes from a lot of people, so I turned it into a bunch of mini-me's, I call them. They're not virtual assistants per se, they're digital assistants, because they don't really have the whole web aspect of everything down, but they do know what they're doing in terms of getting attorney-client work product, data entry work, and the types of things that attorneys and law firms need done. So that's what their expertise is, and I vet them and I put them together with my operations team now. It's, I built the company to the point where I'm kind of just at the top of the food chain, and it's nice to be here, but I did miss the daily and the interactions with the attorneys, which is what turned me into consulting work. And I always had a passion for educating, so I put all of my stuff in the Virtual Bar Association website. But through all of that, my blog suffered, and I just kind of like to get back to blogging. It's a one-on-one thing. You get to be a little more cheeky than I can be on Twitter. So you and I know each other from Twitter for many, many years now. I don't know how many, really. Actually.
Yeah, it's been a while. So your company is a virtual attorney support company, right? And you and I had talked about this earlier. It's distinct from what law clerk does. For example, law clerk is sort of trying to, you're almost finding people who know more than you do about certain things on law clerk and their higher level tasks. I mean, obviously, anytime you start identifying things as higher level and lower level, it puts people in social positions, which is a whole other conversation. But in that sense, you're trying to almost create new complications. Your company is sort of the other direction in that you're trying to simplify. You're trying to take complexity, administrative complexity, maybe unnecessary complexity off of the attorney. Is that right?
Well, yes. Well, very simply, the way to differentiate law clerk legal from legal typist is law clerk legal does substantive work. So if you need research, associate work, that kind of work you can get done. You need administrative work, which is the physical documents, data entry, all of the administrative work that every study that's ever done for the past at least 5 years has just increased the amount of administrative time that attorneys are spending. So we have custom configurations in legal typist, everything from filling in of documents and templates, whatever the case may be, all the way to the data entry into various online whatevers. So again, it's a very custom, it's very hard to talk about, and it's not legal transcription. The company's a little bit, dated in its name, but she is almost 20. So she really was meant to be exactly what attorneys needed to get them away from their keyboards, where they shouldn't be in the first place because they have far too many other things to do, and has morphed into more of a web-based word processing department for any size firm.
Yeah, I mentioned in the book that although I'm not an hours-driven person, I don't like hourly billing. That's a problem. But if you're going to be an expert, if that's the kind of firm you're going to build where you're the product, you need to spend as much time as possible doing expert work. All that pile of whatever that means for you, your non-expert work, whether because it's administrative or because it's in an area you're not trying to focus on, right? So it could even be substantive work, but it's a different kind of substantive work. All that stuff is a distraction from the stuff you should be doing. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to make fun of me is pretty much the
That
plan.
should be good.
So I will give you all the material. I, as an attorney, and even now in the business that I do now, I have tried over and over again to get rid of stuff. And I've done it wrong every time. I just actually, right before we got on this call, I was having a conversation with my sister-in-law who is doing website work for me and stuff, just because I couldn't get this conference out without her doing that stuff. And we ran into the problem that I have every bloody time, which is I've got something in my head and I can't seem to get it out to somebody else. So let's talk through my stupid or my ignorance. Let's talk through my ignorance. So first, the first problem that I always ran into, and I've read, some stuff from Chris Ducker about this, some stuff from Dina Eisenberg, trying to identify what work to get rid of. But I was always really bad at identifying what did I actually want to get rid of. I just went and hired somebody. I just heard somebody say, you need a virtual assistant, or you need a, I call it a legal supply chain manager for the entrepreneurial type lawyer. I just need somebody else, right? And so I just hired somebody, and then they showed up and they were like, what do I do? And I'm like, what do you do? I don't actually know. So talk me through that. How might I identify the kind of stuff I should be getting rid of?
Okay, so there's two things I need to identify here. You as an entrepreneur are going to have different things than somebody who is in the practice of law. And
right. So let's talk from the lawyer perspective, because that's
from a lawyer's perspective. Their job, as far as I'm concerned, is practicing law and maintaining the great relationship they have with existing clients while fostering as many new possible relationships as possible in order to secure incoming new business. It doesn't matter what type of lawyer or what size firm you're at. If you're a lawyer, those are the two main activities that you should be doing. Everything else should be being funneled through either by automation, by taking some kind of a technology, a piece of equipment, something other than the attorney that is a piece of hardware. I call it a digital something or other. And that is automating it out of their need to physically take the time to do stuff. Or they should be delegating down, and whatever the delegation down is down by the process. And that's where I think a lot of people get very confused. And you hear standardization, especially in larger firms. I used to get ridiculed because I never understood why all the IT people would get upset when I would say, just customize the digital workflow to each one of your users' way of working. And they would all be like, oh, no, with standardization. I'm like, it's the difference between they pick up a phone, they hit a slide switch, or they push a button. They don't have to do anything different. And all you have to do is figure out which device it is to hand them. So it's not, so this was always the kind of complexity issue with me. So I've always been at the workflow on the individual user, make nothing they have to do as different as possible. And that's how you get the delegation out, because nobody likes change, not even you. So first you have to figure out what the process is, and then you have to figure out where you're going to send it to.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because something I say all the time is the only thing consistent about your practice is you. You are literally the only thing that's always going to be there. And so to a degree, even though it was nice, I'll just a sort of plug here. When I tried to go the simplest route, and I was just trying to get somebody to do data entry and book flights and stuff, I went the route of Chris Ducker talks about this, and I hired his service, and I hired a virtual assistant in the Philippines. And I wanted to give her all the stuff I didn't want to do, but I didn't really know what that was. The great thing about his service, I thought, was they come in and it prescribes exactly like, this is what this person does. But of course, that wasn't adapted to me at all. And now I'm adjusting me to this worker. And in fairness to Ducker, I didn't follow his advice. His advice was, don't hire a role, hire for tasks, right? So you figure out the work that you shouldn't be doing, list that all off, and then go out and find a virtual assistant who meets those tasks, not the other way around. I don't know if that makes sense, but don't hire. These terms are so ambiguous that you can't hire a machinist.
I see where the difference is between his and I's. It's very simple. I'm at the higher level of the process for the
Uh-huh.
process. So you can have, so long as you have a process, you can figure out where in there to insert a technology or a person. And
Mm,
you have another part of the decision tree there. The technology, is it something, a physical piece of equipment that somebody has to charge and care for and plug in and all this other stuff? Or is it a digital component that they can connect to from your piece of equipment?
right.
And when you go over to the person side, is it somebody that physically is around you and somebody that you can physically hand? There is still a physicalness to work off things too. Note those Post-its behind you. And or is it somebody that's virtual? On the virtual side of it, you are almost always going to do better figuring out the process.
Hmm.
Your process for getting stuff out is think it. Think it, then you have to get it out, but you don't get it out fast enough because you stop in the decision tree trying to figure out where it goes.
Yeah, let
No.
me ask you, maybe you can help me sort this out. So Karen Skinner did a session for this conference with Kim Wilson from our group where what she was trying to do was map out workflows. So she took Post-it notes like this, and Kim talked her through an estate planning client, right? How are they doing intake? Where are they taking out information? And so she's identifying each of those steps. And then what Karen did was sort of flag, here, okay, who gets this piece? Like, and where's the waste? Where should you be just getting rid of stuff? But what you're saying is, rather than me sitting down and saying, I'm going to hire a virtual assistant, let me write down a bunch of tasks. What you're saying is, no, lead with figuring out your workflow and then pull the tasks off and say, who should I source these to? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
I always start with what I call a brain dump. And I don't know where I got it from, but it's been for a long time ago. And I'll give you a link to share with everybody that's got, a lot of this stuff that's already written in, because I've been doing this for so long. So I'll give you all the links for those for everyone.
Right.
But basically, a brain dump is where you have to physically write. You cannot do this electronically. I've tried 18 million different ways. It doesn't work this way. You need a piece of paper. Go ahead, grab that yellow pad that everyone tells you to get rid of all the time. Go buy yourself a nice moleskin. I don't care what it is. Nice writing utensil that's not going to hurt your hand. And you go somewhere out of the sphere that you are used to for a few hours, and you just think of everything that you need to get done with regard to the office. This goes the gamut. You don't do it today. You do it a day or two from now, or the day from two when you plan, so that you can, I call it ruminate. You know that you're going to do it, and your brain is actually collecting stuff that you don't even realize it's collecting until you start writing. And all of a sudden this stuff starts coming forward. You are going to be amazed at how many things come out on that list. The one thing I tell everybody, do not edit. When you edit a list, you go to the other side of your brain and you shut off the creativity. Take this from somebody who is never creative. Don't shut it off when it's happening, and just let it all go. You'll get some personal stuff on there. You'll get stuff that doesn't pertain to the office. You'll get stuff that you really don't need, but you will get a majority of everything. The whole goal is to get everything on that list. Once you have that list, that's when we chunk it. We figure out what's your highest value task. What's the stuff that has to go? How many hats are you actually wearing? Not one attorney should be the IT guy. Not one of you should be in charge of the IT for your firm. You should have a solid professional between you.
I think it's funny that your speaker went out while you were talking about having ideal technology. That's funnier. Did you unplug a headphone? There you are.
There I
Yeah,
am.
well,
Sorry.
so clarify that for me, because I'm sort of hearing maybe two different things, or maybe I'm not ordering them right. So when I did the brain dump type thing, where I'm just like, here's a bunch of tasks, and again, this is a Chris Ducker and a Dean Eisenberg has a similar thing, where then you take that dump and then you categorize it with, what shouldn't I be doing because of my role, like you mentioned, what don't I want to do, because again, you're the only thing consistent about your practice. Get rid of the crap you don't want to do, and what can't I do, right? The stuff that I'm not trained in doing, I should get rid of that stuff. But the issue that I found with that I think we just identified, was that was relying on my ability to know what's needed. Whereas if I sit and do the work first of figuring out my process, my workflow for a given case, now my task identification is coming from an ideal of how I serve clients, as opposed to how do I get crap off my plate. So like, how how would you, are those two separate kinds of activities for discovering tasks to get rid of? Are they related? What do you think?
When you get to the list and you have everything.
I'm sorry, Andrea, for some reason your sound just got really quiet.
So how's that better? Hello? Better?
No, it's still really quiet. Not sure why.
Hello, hello.
Oh, there you go.
There I am. Okay.
Sorry. Tell me about the two different approaches.
Yeah. Okay, so when you get the stuff that's on your list and you've chunked it down, you can't just get rid of the tasks you don't like to do. A lot of productivity people tell you that, and I wish that I could, but there's some things as a quote business owner or as a partner or as a responsible part of your firm are things that are going to be there that have to be there even if you don't like doing them.
Right.
So don't analyze your tasks based on what you want to be doing. I mean, of course, I'm a happiness person. I build happy offices, stress less workflows, and websites that work. So if you want to be happy, you want to get rid of as many of the lower level tasks as you can. Think of yourself in a hierarchy, not because you're higher up or better than because you're an attorney. Says the only person, you call me non-attorney all you want. I am not offended by that term at all. I'm a non-doctor too. I don't consider it a hierarchy thing. I consider it a distinction for clients. And if there's any attorney out there that's using it with that kind of a sneer, trust you me, sooner or later, the people that know people who talk like that versus the people who talk like me pretty much figure it out. And, you know, that attorney gets, I don't want to say a lesson, but eventually finds out why it is that you don't talk to anybody like that, not let alone whether or not just because somebody's not an attorney. So in any event, what I'm trying to say is you take your tasks, you chunk them out, you find the stuff that only you can do, and you try to pull out anything that you don't have to do. There's things that you're going to have to do that you don't like, but of course, pull out the things that you have to do, anything that you don't have to do, and especially stuff you don't like. That's the stuff you try to push as far down. There isn't a survey out there that isn't talking about how much administrative work attorneys are doing. If you find that you're clunking behind your keyboard, you're not doing it right. You can get your stuff out by voice 7 times faster than you can keyboard as a fast typist. I remember a stat at one point. Start using your voice for other things. How do you use your voice for other things? It's not just dictation, it's delegation via voice. So for you, this is where I was actually leading up exactly for you. If you and I were having a conversation, I would tell you right now, download the app, Dictate Plus Connect. It's like $20, put it on your iPhone, put it on your Android device. It's the only thing that I could find to make Apple devices secure enough for legal workflows. So I finally was able to do that. It goes on iPads as well. Anyway, use this app, and just whenever you have a thought, after you do the physical brain dump, now you use the Dictate Plus Connect when you have a task or something that needs somebody else to do or you just to record, record it.
Right. Yeah, it's like my kids, I taught my kids during this crazy break how to use Kanban boards, and the first thing is just the brain dump. Like they have a thing of Post-it notes right next to them. If something pops in their head that they just need to get rid of, they just write it down real quick, put it away, and get back to what they're doing. So I like this idea of recognizing that tasks will come as you go. One of the other things that I really was terrible at that I think I've just improved at with a tool we'll talk about is, because I was so bad at identifying what tasks I should be handing off, when it came to Sunday night meetings or Monday morning meetings, depending on who I was using, it was just crickets. Like the person would ask me, what do you need done this week? And I'm like, stuff. You know, I had the hardest time communicating to them, here's a list of things to do, you know, here's how you do them well. What if you've got somebody in the right role, you've identified what tasks they should do because you know the workflow, and you've got a way to brain dump tasks like you talked about, how do you communicate those well to the person you're trying to send them to?
Well, that's the process map. And that's exactly what I think you were saying that Karen Skinner was showing. You do a process map for, I call it for anything that bottlenecks, anything. It's very easy to identify these tasks that are outside of the quote legal lawyer work. Let's not forget, everybody has this legal lawyer work that needs to get done, and that requires thinking time, focus time, time when you actually can't be, you know, doing some of this other stuff. So what I'm trying to say is it's a lot longer for you to figure out how to pull all this out. You pull it all out, you get it off, you move it over, you do it in the fastest way possible, which is not keyboarding for most attorneys. And you don't, once the task is off, you have the process map for it. So let's just say, so here it is, you have this, you're an estate attorney and you have to put together a bunch of estate documents and you have to have your clients have an appointment to come in and sign them, and you want to date it out for 2 weeks. So now your staff knows that there's 18 documents that have to be put together for 2 people with all of this other stuff that has to go with it, blah, 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 blah. They get all of the physical parts of the work together and put it together. And now they have to make the appointment with the client, have the client come in and do all this stuff. That's a process. From start to finish, it never changes. That's how it goes from start to finish. Now that process, you map that out. You can realize that you can do document automation and put the templates together in order to automate that part of the process, if that's where you're in. You could take your internal staff out of the process and find an outsourced service provider in order to do something like that. You could find an outsourced service provider to actually do the client interview and do the data entry into an online cloud service provider so that the documents could be generated. There's 1,000 different ways to automate the workflow and pull things out. At one point, you cannot pull out the person. And the person that you can't pull out is eventually going to be the attorney, but that should be the last possible step, because that's the most expensive time for a law firm. An attorney's time is the most expensive. So you want to delegate down to the least possible pay grade. It's not by what their name is. It's not by what you call them. It's by how much you basically pay them is how you want to do it. And then you get it down. And you eventually build a team based on the tasks that came off of that brain dump, which you and I can call what? Like a digital Kanban. We're doing it via voice, and we're doing it through just the first time is a writing, but it's not on Post-its. I get the Kanban thing, but
well, I
you
think
can see my walls a little clean behind me.
right. I think what's your daughter appreciates that. I think that I actually, this is my son's room I'm sitting in right now. That's his wall. I just took it over. I think what's helpful about this, just to get nerdy about it a second, there's a book called This is Lean, and one of the things he talks about is the difference between resource efficiency and flow efficiency. Resource efficiency is, here's a lawyer. This lawyer's got this to-do list. How many items in that day can that lawyer get done? It's very focused on me being in the churn and just doing a bunch of stuff in a day, versus flow efficiency, which is how to get cases moving, thinking in a workflow, because clients really don't give a crap about how much you got done in a day. What they care about is how long it takes for them to get what they want, right? And so if you're, I like this idea of thinking more in terms of workflow. I will say, in terms of a tool that I discovered this week, which this could be so basic and I'm so dumb for not knowing this, but there's a tool called Loom. And basically what Loom does is I can record my screen. So when I give a task off to my assistant, my sister-in-law, instead of me being like, you know, you just do the thing on the website with the buttons and you push and then make the colors right? Or having to sit there and really detail it with her on the phone, I can just do a quick walkthrough, right? And so by the time she comes to the task on Monday or whatever, she's got a list of videos to watch for all of the things that I need to do. And you only have to do that once. So like you said, once you figure out the workflow, here's the piece inside the workflow. I'm going to show you how to do it one time. I never have to explain it to you again. And because it was voice, like you said, because it was video, it wasn't me sitting and trying to write something out. It was so fast to do. Loom is an awesome tool, way better for communicating than what I was doing before.
I haven't heard of that one, so thank you for sharing that with me. Most
Yeah.
of the people that I work with would prefer no video, so audio is more than sufficient. And the reason why I like Dictate plus Connect is, again, well, there's the security issue for attorney-client work product. I get into that if people really want to hear it, but it is secure enough for attorney-client work product.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm just having somebody fix my website.
All you have to do is tap. Once you set it up, there's a legal typist is actually hard coded into the app. That's how much I love it. And once you put your user ID in, all you have to do, instead of do a setting, all you have to do is tap, talk, tap, and whatever that was in your brain is now captured in your workflow. And that's one of the reasons why I love Dictate plus Connect as a productivity tool.
Right. So I wanted to ask you too about, you know, there's something about tasks and saying this is the right person for this task. There's also something about roles, meaning I couldn't take high executive function tasks and give them to just anybody, right? Like there were some tasks with low executive function that I can send over here. There's some that I really need you to be creative and think, and you understand me and what I want and the culture and the proper tone with clients or whatever. How do you, maybe the answer here is that you create a team with different executive, like it would be better to have 4 people at 10 hours a week, each with a different level of executive function, than to have one person for 40 hours doing all different kinds of tasks. Is that
Yes.
plausible?
And using the exact same workflow that you've put in place with your sister-in-law for your website, as a matter of fact. You would just delegate different tasks. It's not so much about finding the people for the, okay, so what you're finding is you now know how to delegate. You've put together a process map to delegate. You didn't realize that's exactly what you did, but that's exactly what you did. The person now knows what it is that you want done. Some of that will be foundational knowledge with the terms, colors, whatever, whatever. But some of it will also be ongoing knowledge moving forward on building the process map, which most people end up calling their operations manual. So along with having all of the rules of the firm and all the rest of the firm, there's an ongoing process. Some people are doing it digitally. They're doing it with, there's apps that can do it. There's parts of Office 365 that you could do it in and whatnot. But you could just do it, just a simple bunch of checklists, whatever it is.
Right.
But you basically start process by process and filtering down. And if you don't have the right most cost-effective person in the spot, that's when you start searching. You either search for a technology to take over that role, or you look for somebody else to delegate who has that particular. Like you wouldn't want to give your website work to somebody that's out there doing, say, like if you're an attorney, you wouldn't want to give website work to somebody that's doing legal document work.
Yeah, there's
Or
sort of
somebody
this
that's doing,
dream
yeah, no,
that
research,
you
no.
you can get the super paralegal, whatever that means, and that person like knows when you want coffee and also how to raise people from the dead and also fill out your legal forms. Like when you're putting that much need onto a person, you're also giving that person a ton of control and making it really difficult for your business to function without that person. Do you have any thoughts on the super paralegal?
Okay, so I don't like to say paralegal so much because they usually find it could be an associate, it could be an assistant, it could be, again, the name doesn't really matter, but usually an attorney finds somebody that they can confide in. There's a lot of stress that goes on. There's a lot of crap that happens in law that until
Right.
you're in it and you're churning it, like, the staff knows it just as much as the attorneys do, and they're caught in it just as much. It's just on the other end of it, and usually lower down, crap rolls downhill and all. Isn't that always fun? But what I like to tell people about when it comes to, first of all, you're trying to take advantage of the digital economy and the not actually having an employee. Once you get to a certain standard of requirement for that other individual, you start crossing some lines that some different governmental agencies, note I'm not an attorney, I don't even play one ever, might want to take a look at what you're doing and go, that person may or may not be somebody that is a quote, may or may not. So again, there's issues there. And quite honestly, I was that assistant. I did that for most of my adult life until I went digital, until I had kids. And it's not something that comes quite inexpensively, which is what most people are trying to do when building a digital workflow. So you can get the super person to be there at your beck and call and anticipate your every need. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying
Right.
to
So
replace that.
get a therapist, and then get some properly positioned assistants, and talk to your therapist and stop.
Well, what everyone forgets, once you get through this, and a lot of people get overwhelmed thinking that I have to do this for every process. No, you just have to do it once.
Right.
So yes, it's going to take you 10 minutes and a blank piece of paper for you to check off everything that needs to be done, because you find yourself repeating doing something that you don't want to be doing.
Right.
You have to learn how to get rid of it all. You actually have to learn what it is that you don't like doing. There is still some learning on your part in order to effectively do this. There's also budget. So there's no,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you
there's
about
no
pricing.
$5 fiver, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I've done both, right? I went out and I got somebody super cheap. Like I went and I got somebody from the Philippines at $3 an hour, whatever the freak it was. And that person required so much attention that it was taking 2 hours to do something that I could do in an hour. And obviously that's still cheaper. I mean, I should still do that. But it started to eat up my hours, right?
Using too much of your time. You're
Yeah,
not freeing up enough of your time to make it of value to you. That's the
exactly.
whole idea.
But then I've done the other thing, which was hire somebody for way too much because they're like a demigod and I'm waiting for them to solve all my life's problems. And what we're talking about, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would be, again, better to have 4 people who are properly positioned that are different levels of executive function, different levels of skills. They have different skills rather than try to find one super person in one direction or the other. So in terms of pricing, in terms of what we should expect to pay, can we identify some of these roles and what might maybe where we should start with, or how much the different kinds of roles might cost us?
Okay, so depends.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. You have
Um,
passed the bar. Well done.
okay. So you can find cost-effective ways to do things. But when I find the lower you go on the amount that you outlay, the more time you spend on the other end,
Sure.
fixing it, redoing it, finagling it, whatever it is. So I don't want to just say that from this, but to me, that's where it kind of seems. So yes, you can find somebody that will do it. You can find a technology that may do it for only $4.99 per month. But what comes back? Is that something that's ready to be filed with the court, or is that something that you still have to try to figure out what happened with the paragraph numbers? So what I'm trying to say is it's kind of like it's an up or down, and there's always a quality issue. When you go to crowdsourcing sites and you fill out this RFP and all of a sudden these people start coming back with stuff for you, how do you know where those images came from?
Yeah.
It's again, it's kind of like saying, well, you know what, you guys are all lawyers and you're all the same and you all cost the same, so I'm just going to go with the guy down there that just charges me, he's going to charge me, I'm going to be fun and say 100 an hour, 150 an hour. No, attorneys are out there 350 for whatever, they're at their cost. And, so does it mean that I can't find a really good attorney cost effectively? No. Will I have to hunt a little bit better? Perhaps, because now you have to find the one that understands the value of ratio of their time and input and values their clients the same way that you do and the same way that I do.
Yeah, I think my mix by the end of my practice, I'll tell you, and maybe this is helpful, but I would, for people who are better than me at legal stuff, I'm going to law clerk and I'm usually paying 100, 150 an hour. They do flat fees, so you're not paying hourly, but I mean, that's sort of an estimate. For higher, paralegal-ish work that's legal, but that it's not substantive work, I think I was usually paying like 50 an hour for that. For higher non-legal work, I was going to a resource like hiremymom.com and I was paying $35 an hour. And those were pretty good. They were more on my business side than on my law side. They were doing
Right.
more of the me as an executive. They were more like executive assistants. And then I would go to a resource like Upwork for much, lower level work. And I was usually paying somewhere between $8 and $15 an hour for that. And so for me, by the end, it was less about who do I need, and it was more about what's the collection of people that I need, right? And so now, like you said, I'm just able to grab a Post-it note out of a workflow and say, ooh, this should go to this person. But these are all very, these are skills that they don't teach us in law school, right?
Don't teach them anywhere.
Yeah, I in the book I talk about the 4 competencies, which are design, source, build, and deliver, and those are not things that we're taught. And so one of the best hires that I want to get you to talk to me about that I found was finding somebody to do those 4 things for me. That they were sticking Post-it notes up on the wall and finding workflows. They were the ones saying, ooh, this should be sourced somewhere else, and they're connecting with those different sources. The build phase has to do with quality control, so there's somebody overlooking it and making sure the quality is good. And then they're paying attention to the client experience, which is that deliver function. If I want that kind of person, somebody who can see the bigger picture like that, where would you go for that kind of person?
Hi.
Solve all my problems. Just solve my problems.
I like to say I'm strategy and workflow. So, well, I don't know anybody else who does what I do. And I keep
Mm.
checking and I keep trying. And I love Dina Eisenberg. She's really great. She understands the paralegal thing. She understands onboarding. She gets what it is and how attorneys work, which is great because so many people don't, there's so many texts and so many quote experts, gurus, whatever you want to call themselves. I just found somebody that I've known for a very long time, has changed jobs, and the first line of his bio is that he's extremely influential on Twitter. I was like,
It was me.
now,
I'm sort of a power player.
no, because I would bust your chops for that. I'd be all over that. I'd be like, who are you? I don't know you.
When I try to tell my kids what I do for work, they're like, so you're a YouTube star? I'm like, no, don't.
No,
But they
full
finally
stop.
respect me. Yeah, when I tell them that this is how I get my work, they tell me they finally respect me and will listen to me. Well, I appreciate that. And I like the idea of going workflow first and task oriented as opposed to role, I'm going to go
Right.
find the magic person. I like the idea of creating a stable of people that are appropriate to the post-it note, right? Or appropriate to the particular task. I like that idea. I really like the idea of hiring somebody else to figure all that crap out for me, because I might not be a good product designer, right? Like I might not be a service designer who can go in and say, this is what an ideal client experience looks like.
Consider it operations. And I've
Yeah.
never known anyone, I've known online people who build online businesses for clients. So if you want to say there's that, but I don't know anyone who transcends the digital to the physical the way that I do. And especially,
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because Chris is a small town lawyer. He's one of the interviews that we did, and he's had to turn a rural firm into like a scaled firm. It's a multi-million-dollar firm now, which I can say from a rural practice is really hard. And one of the things that he had to do was create an operations staff. To do that, he was having a really hard time finding somebody in law who understood that. He actually went outside law, hired a project manager, somebody who not somebody who said on their resume, I'm a project manager, because that's just a word, but who had training and could sit down and do some of these service design principles. Huge help for him. I mean, he even mentioned like he's dumb like on these things. We're just not taught on these things. Nobody trains us on this stuff. So getting somebody who's qualified for that, and that again on outsourcing was one of my issues. Was I was thinking it was me trying to transfer my brain to someone else. But Chris pointed out, don't do that. Hire somebody who's way smarter than you. Like find for the different functions, the different tasks, don't get you, because this is not what you're trained for, right? Like you said, it's just a different role. Being a lawyer, you just have different training. So do the thing you're trained for. If people want to follow up with you and talk more about sort of these strategic things and these bigger picture things, identifying the workflows and getting them assigned out correctly, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
oh, absolutely. You can connect with me on Twitter. I'm Andrea Can, because my last name's Cannavina, so nobody's ever going to get that one right. So it's Andrea, AndreaCan, and it's AndreaCannavina.com, which you can get through from Twitter. And I'm also I'm the CEO of Legal Typist. So if you want to take a look at the business that I started with all those years ago, my first baby, I love to call her. She's the reason why I've never had to get venture capital, because when something just works, you can be good. So she's the one who powerhouses my ability to try to do the trainings that I've done and put in place the processes and the people. Because at the end of the day, my goal is with the attorneys that I'm on the phone with is I hear it. And I hear them go from the stress that they were to the laughing and having a conversation. And to me, that's the human connection. That's the part that you miss when you're virtual all the time. We didn't get to really discuss that. We were talking about how there was a disconnect earlier, and there is a resource I want to call it everyone's attention to. It's called Solosez, SOLOSEZ, and it is a listserv for email. So I'd say
Old
sign up for
school.
Gmail with that.
Old
It can
school.
get prolific.
Right.
It's full of mostly lawyers, but it's actually open to the public, which is why me, the non-lawyer, gets to be there. And I just have to say every single time that I post that I'm not which I kind of do. And I've been there. I was very lonely in the beginning. I was one of the first. And it wasn't until I found Solo Says that I found that quote virtual water cooler, and got that bit of at least digital connection to people, which ultimately led me going to Chicago, flying there by myself, and ultimately speaking at ABA Tech Show, because I had met all of these people who I initially had connected with either through Twitter or through this listserv. So if any attorneys are out there feeling stressed and just want to get together with a bunch of other attorneys, there are some rules, so read them, pay attention. They're not a lot. It's not like your normal terms of service. So actually read them and join that. But this
Well, I
whole
appreciate
process
that.
thing, it's about the workflow.
Uh-huh.
You need to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to talk to everybody. I give everybody a 20-minute call. You can sign up automatically over at the website. Just ping me on Twitter. Catch me on anywhere online and tell me that you just want to set up a call, and I'm here. I'm more than happy.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Andrea. And I will say, speaking of community, make sure that you get to the Lawyer Forward Facebook group. Remember, we're going to have a conversation around this conversation. So look for the appropriate video tag. You can
I'll be
share
there,
ideas.
even though it's I hope it won't be at 10 o'clock at night.
It's totally up to you. You're the boss. But yeah, we'll be pinging around ideas about how to do this well. Andrea will be there to help us understand how to do this stuff better. I'll be there as well. So make sure you join the Lawyer Forward Facebook group. Keep a lookout for that. Thank you, Andrea. We will not see each other in person for a while, but I'll see you in the virtual world. Thank you, dear.
Take care. Thanks for everybody. Have a good one.